Everybody, it's Stream, and today we have a 9-game Major League Baseball slate for you. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Before we get into the slate, let's get into our weather issues. The Philadelphia game, the Cincinnati game, and the Chicago Cubs game all have weather concerns, and I do think that there's potential for some delays in those games, so do keep that in mind today. But overall, I do think most of the games will play. In fact, I think all those games will play. It's just we'll just have to wait for the weather closer to the slate to make sure. So those games are a little bit of a concern for pitching and stuff, especially. Let's get into our pitchers now. So my top overall guy is Spencer Strider. He is in a positive matchup here against Miami. He's been somewhat inconsistent this season, but he gets a ton of strikeouts. And as long as he doesn't give up a couple more than a few earned runs, then he will have a good fantasy day, though his price is super expensive, so he does need to score 30 plus fantasy points to really pay off here. But he is viable and possible. It is very possible for him to do that. In fact, his best game this season was against Miami, where he had 13 strikeouts and did a shutout. So I do think he's very capable of having a quality game. In that game, he had 47 fantasy points. So uh, obviously, something like that is possible, though I think in the 25 to 35 range is probably the most ideal situation for him today. Moving on to another option at P1 is Garrett Cole. He does have a tougher matchup against St. Louis, as they've been hitting the ball decently recently, but he has a 15 to 25 fantasy point game here in order. I think that he's only had a few games under 15 fantasy points all season long, and he's got a really good ceiling. The matchup is fine, and his K rate has been mostly good all year. I do think he's had a couple off games, but for the most part, especially against average opponents, he's done quite well. So I do think he's in a good spot here. Kevin Gausman for Toronto is also in play today. Against Boston is a tougher matchup than the top two guys, but he does have a higher ceiling than Cole, which gives him a little bit of advantage. And aside from really three really bad games this season, he's been near 20 fantasy points in every game. He's not had more than 3 earned runs in any game outside the 3 bad ones I mentioned, and he's had 5 wins in the last 7 games as well. So he definitely has some nice utility here, though he does face a tougher matchup than the top 2 options. A P2 option that I like the best is not super ideal, but it is Ranger Suarez for Philly. He's had a decent season, and he's really improved recently, as his first few starts were pretty rough, but in the last 5 games, he's been over 18 fantasy points or better, and he's faced a good group of teams, too, in those games, and he's only given up 1 earned run in any of those games, so he has really good metrics here. Not only that, but his strikeout rate has improved, and as long as he's pitching well, he's a decent option. Now, there are a couple bats on Washington that I do think have some viability today, but as long as he's pitching as well as he is, and limiting the fly balls and stuff, he's got a lot of opportunity here to have a really solid day. A good alternative to him is Abbott um, for Cincinnati here, as he draws an interesting start here against San Diego, which again I do like some bats from San Diego, but he's pitched fairly well in his first 5 games of his career. The last 2 being kind of tough, but not or imperfect, but he's scoring really good fantasy points because he's getting decent strikeout rate for the most part, with the exception of I think his 3rd game against Houston. He is a little bit of a concern today because this game's in Cincinnati and there is weather issues, and that can definitely be tougher. But even in the 2 games in Cincinnati, he's been over 20 fantasy points so far. His price has come up though, so that is a little bit of a concern, but he is definitely viable on the slate. Another alternative would be Jordan Montgomery for St. Louis. Now, he does face a very tough matchup here against the Yankees, and he has a low floor. But he has had 3 straight games over 20, or sorry, he's had 3 straight, blah, blah. He's had 3 fantasy point games over 20 fantasy points in the last 4 games, with 3 wins. And this matchup isn't ideal, obviously, but he does have some upside as he's pitching well right now, and he's really not giving up too many earned runs, and he's getting some strikeouts, so that definitely gives him some utility on the slate. And then I have 2 Hail Mary plays in Whitlock and Rich Hill. Whitlock for Texas is facing Houston, or sorry, Whitlock for Boston is facing Toronto, which is a tough matchup, but he has had 4 wins and recently, which gives him some advantage. Though he does have a low floor, so he's a little bit risky. As for Hill, he's facing Milwaukee, who has been inconsistent this season, and his K rate has been up and down, though his ceiling is pretty capped here. If he steals a win, he could pay off, but it's pretty risky. So those are the two Hail Mary options I like to boast. As for our catchers, let's get into that here. We'll start with Will Smith for the Dodgers, as he draws really good metrics for this game. He's got really good upside and a nice matchup here. He's been kind of slumpy lately, though. I mean, he's had some good games, but he's had some bad ones as well. If he can get some hits, then that would definitely pay off here. Oops, not Sean Murphy. I'm sorry. JT Realmuto is also in play here for Philly, as I really do like a Philly stack today, and he definitely draws some good home run metrics for this one. I like his potential here, and he draws some really good upside. Gary Sanchez is a risky play today, but he is viable for a home run or bust simply because this game's in Cincinnati, and his metrics are off the charts here. Though I do think that the matchup is a little bit difficult, but if you want to go cheap here, then he's definitely the way to go about it. And then we'll look at William Contreras from Milwaukee at $4,300. He's a good value play. He's got nice home run potential, and he's hitting the ball pretty well, and he scores some decent amount of fantasy points a lot of times, so I do like his upside here, and he's in a pretty good matchup as well. Uh, then we'll move into first base here, and we'll start with Freddie Freeman, who I do like a lot today. Again, he's hitting the ball pretty well lately, though he isn't scoring a ton of fantasy points every game. If he can hit a home run, that obviously help pay off here, but he is a viable option. Nate Lowe is also in play for Texas, as he draws really good metrics here. He has a nice potential, and he draws a good home run upside in a little bit of a tough matchup, but it's for him specifically, but he definitely has a good utility here. Jose Abreu is a value play for Houston, as I like the matchup, and he has home run potential. He is hitting the ball better recently, which is definitely an advantage here. And then Nelson Cruz is kind of a Hail Mary option, kind of borderline Hail Mary option, though he does have a tough matchup against Abbott. It is in Cincinnati, and he does draw home run potential in this particular matchup. Maybe in the second baseman, we'll start with Jose Altuve, who is a core play for me. He draws really great metrics in this game. He's hitting the ball really well lately, and I like his upside here. Then we'll look at Kim for San Diego, a guy I probably like a lot in this matchup, simply because he's hitting the ball pretty decently lately. He's having some good fantasy point games, and he doesn't need home runs to do it necessarily, so I like his upside. Matt McLain is also in play. Oops, for Cincinnati is also in play. He can play second or shortstop. Now, there is a discrepancy whether Yu Darvish is going to start or not today. We'll have to wait closer to lock. But regardless of who starts for San Diego, some of the Reds players look really solid in this game. Plus, it's a game at Cincinnati, which gives it an advantage to bats. And so I really do like his upside. He's hitting the ball extremely well lately, and he has great matchup upside. Bryson Stott, sorry, for Philly, draws some really good metrics here. He has a decent home run upside and good hitting potential in this game, and I do think Philly is a good team to stack. As I said, Elly De La Cruz is a great option in third base and shortstop today, though he's very expensive. He does need to get stolen bases and potentially a home run to really pay off here, but he is more than capable in this matchup to do so. We'll also look at Alex Bregman, who's quite a bit cheaper, and he draws some really good upside in this one against Heaney. He has hit the ball pretty decently lately, and he has home run potential, though his fantasy points have been inconsistent. But he definitely draws a great matchup here, and his prices come down some. Josh Donaldson is a very good, cheap play for this position. He's a boom or bust play exclusively, though, and so that is kind of, you have to hope he hits a home run. He hasn't been playing every game either, but if he does draw the start today, he'll be somebody that's viable. And then DJ LeMahieu for the Yankees also in play today. He's hit the ball a little bit better than Donaldson, but he's a little bit more of a base hitter right now, and so I do think he has some utility at this cheap price, but he's a little bit risky. Maybe the shortstops, we're looking at Mookie Betts, who draws just really top-tier metrics for this game, and I really like his upside with the home run potential. He's hitting them quite well lately, though his price is high and a little bit hard to roster today with the expensive pitchers, but he's definitely in play. Elly De La Cruz can play this position, as can Matt McLain, and of course I like both of those guys a lot. A good value play here is Jeremy Pena if he plays. We'll have to wait and see if he draws a start today. It looks like maybe he will, but we'll have to wait and see for certain. He didn't play yesterday, so But if he does draw the start, he's cheap enough that he draws some nice utility here. And then a really good value play is Volpe for the Yankees, who's just hitting the ball really well recently, and he has some really good upside. He's had, I think, five or six straight games with 2 hits or more, and I like his upside in this situation. Then we'll move into outfielders, and we're gonna start with our core guys. Our top plays are Fernando Tatis, Ronald Acuna, Bryce Harper, and Kyle Schwarber. Now, I have Bryce Harper as a core play as he draws incredible metrics for this game. They are off the charts. He hasn't hit the home runs this season so far, but he does draw the potential here, and I like his upside. Schwarber is also in play for the Philly at this position. Maybe the value plays, we'll look at Lane Thomas, who does draw a matchup against a pitcher I do like, but he's just hitting the ball really well, and I think he's going to draw a good opportunity to get on base in this particular game and potentially sneak a home run. Jake Fraley is a very interesting option today as a core play for Cincinnati. He draws really good metrics for this game. He's been a little bit inconsistent lately, but he has had a lot of really good games as well, so I think he's got really nice upside. His fantasy point per game is also rising. TJ Friedl is in play for Cincinnati as well. He's hit the ball really well this season, though he is sometimes a little bit inconsistent. He's had some really good games lately as well. And with this game being at home, he draws really good metrics. Yelich for Milwaukee draws really nice upside here. Not a ton of home run potential today, but he's been hitting the ball well, and I like his fantasy upside in this particular matchup. Jack Sawinski for Pittsburgh is also in play. He's a nice, cheap home run play. He's hitting the ball really well lately, though the batting average hasn't been great this season. He has had a nice string of good games, and that's typically when I like to use him, is once he's gotten kind of a streak of a few games going, and then he tends to go pretty good for a little while. So he's in a good spot right now. Nick Castellanos is also in play for Philly, as he draws some really good metrics here. He's had some really good games recently, though, and he has nice batting average, including a home run potential in this one. Brandon Marsh is a kind of he's in a good spot, but he's not really a big time home run option today. But he's a good guy for to help fill in your Philadelphia stack if you want to go with one, as he's got some good games recently and he has some good potential. He's not as ideal as some of the other options, but he's a good guy to stack as a cheap option for the Philadelphia Phillies. Then we'll look at Harrison Bader for the Yankees, who draws a decent matchup here, and he's been hitting the ball really well recently, which is a nice addition to their lineup since he's been in it. He's had some good games, and he's really been pretty consistent at that. I'm sorry about that, but I really do like his upside in this matchup, and he's nice and cheap, which helps. And then Peralta for the Dodgers has been somewhat inconsistent this season, but he has managed to get hits a lot, and that's really helping his fantasy output. And so while he does have some utility as a home run hitter sometimes, he definitely has nice upside in this game, though he does carry a little bit of risk. Then we'll look at Varsho for Toronto finally. He has really good home run potential today, but he's nearly a boomer bust call, as he has been in a bit of a slump from a home run perspective. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.